So, hello everyone. My name is Sandra Kučina, and I'm moderating today the last webinar in the Open Education Week organized by Eden, Digital Learning Europe. And welcome. Before I start and share my screen, just some brief technical information. So you can say in chat, hi and where you're coming from. And all the questions during the session, you can post into question and answer icon so that we see it, and we will try to answer all the questions during the session. Let me just share my presentation so that we can start. Okay. So just briefly before we start, this is the Eden's 10th in a row Open Education Week. During the whole week you had sessions, so today is the last of the sessions we prepared for this event. This is our contribution to open education on a global level, and openness as such, as it is very important to emphasize the accessibility and openness of education for everyone. Before the session, just a short announcement that Eden Conference, this year annual conference, will be in Porto in June. The paper submission and registration is open. Then you can submit your paper to publish in EURODL, which is also European Journal of Open Distance and E-Learning. And in the end, you can join the Eden network of academics and professionals, meet colleagues, exchange information, knowledge, and know-how, and communicate and collaborate. But let's come to the session we plan to give you today. Title of today's session is Digital Preservation and Revitalization of Endangered Scripts, the case of Dongba script. Well, I'm certain that many of you have never heard of Dongba script. Well, we will provide the session based on this case, but what is important is to show that such endangered scripts and languages and cultural practices can also become preserved and revitalized and more visible with use of digital technologies, with use of AI, and to use also the MOOCs in a way to help them preserve through a methodological approach. So today's session, we will give you insight on such endangered scripts, but we will focus later on one case. And today I'm happy that we have speakers. Tim Brookes from Endangered Alphabet Project and the Script Keepers Network. He and World Endangered Writing Day. He was educated at Oxford. He's author of 23 books, including an Atlas of Endangered Alphabets, Writing Beyond Writing and by Hand, and he lives in Cambridge. So, Tim, I'm very happy that you are with us today. Thank you. The next is Philippa Steele from University of Cambridge, and she runs an UKRI-funded project, Visual Interactions in Early Writing Systems, based in the Faculty of Classics, with the research team looking at the visual features and context of writing. She has also founded a collaborative initiative focused on language and writing's endangerment and the Endangerment Writing Network. And following a doctorate, she focused on the languages of ancient Cyprus. Philippa has published widely on languages and writing system of the ancient Aegean and Mediterranean. In her current research, she's working towards a cross-cultural study of textual arrangements, particularly writing direction and layout, as she encountered in writing system ancient and modern around the world. She also has particular interest in minoritized indigenous and endangered languages and writing traditions. In 2021, Professor Philippa Steele, she was immortalized as a Lego figure and inducted into the Lego Classics Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, she will not be able to be with us personally today, but we will play the recording she has prepared. And last but not least, Jade Wang-Szilas is researcher in distance education and digital language learning with 2 decades of experience in online course design, technology-enhanced learning, and intercultural pedagogy. She is associate researcher at the University of Geneva and at Pledam, and a senior advisor in technology-enhanced learning at the University of Geneva Center for Continuing and Distance Education. Her research focuses on computer-assisted language learning, multilingual course design, and intercultural pedagogy, including the digital revitalization of endangered writing system. Her work emphasized multimodality, AI integration in education, teacher training, digital competencies, and cross-cultural collaboration. She has co-initiated and coordinated several internationally recognized open learning initiatives, including the Chinese-French e-tandem course, a pioneering telecollaboration connecting learners in Switzerland, France, and China. Then the first introductory Chinese MOOC for French speakers, initiation to the Dongba script, a MOOC dedicated to safeguarding and revitalizing an endangered script, and didactique du FLA dans une perspective francophone, a professional development MOOC for French teachers worldwide. So we will focus very much on the languages, I would say ancient languages, but certainly we will provide the perspective as well, how can, with use of digital technologies and openness, we can preserve them, and how can we make these languages more visual, more preserved, and how to set the strategies for revitalization of such endangered or minority scripts. So this is my introduction, and now I will stop sharing my screen and I will give the floor to Tim. Tim is going to explore what minority writing systems are, why are so many endangered, and why they matter culturally and politically. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody, wherever you are from, wherever you are in the world. Before I share screen, I just want to add one tiny detail. What I work on, in fact, are not ancient languages. All of the scripts that I focus on are ones that are to some extent current. And so the work that I do focuses on the scripts that are in this state of being on the cusp of being used or not used, developed or vanishing altogether. So with that, I will share my screen. And we've all done this thing many times. Okay, so yes. Why do they matter in particular? So one of the things I discovered very early on when I started the Endangered Alphabets project was that if you put up a sign saying, talk today, lecture today, exhibition, endangered alphabets, nobody would know what on earth you were talking about. And your attendance would be pretty much zero. So I'm going to start from that point and move forward. And one of the first things I want to do is to show you just one letter in a threatened minority system. This beautiful thing here is my carving of the letter E from the Cham alphabet. The Cham state or kingdom no longer exists. We'll come back to that in a minute. But when you see something like this, it's obviously very different from what most of us are used to when we think of writing or script. And it's also really clear that it has its own beauty and integrity and is not to be dismissed or ignored. So the statistics as we know them, these are very approximate. Of the world's roughly 7,000 languages, perhaps half are thought to be endangered. So when I say languages here, I'm talking about spoken languages. So when I started the Endangered Alphabets Project, there were no estimates either of how many writing systems are in use in the world or to what extent they're endangered. And I spent 10 years trying to identify them, and I found about 300, and of them, 85 to 90% are threatened to some extent or other. So this is clearly a silent crisis. It's one that just isn't on people's radar. So, what is the difference between an endangered language and an endangered script? And why is it that we, especially in North America and in Europe, I don't think really much about endangered scripts? So here, for example, is an example of an endangered language. This is the Munsee language, which was once spoken where New York City is. It's a Native American language. And when you look at this grid, obviously we can read the English down the right-hand column, and we can attempt to pronounce the Munsee words in the center and left columns. So this is an example of a critically endangered language. But when we look at it, it looks both unfamiliar and familiar because it's written in the Latin alphabet, which was not how the original speakers wrote it, of course. This is how it has been Europeanized in order to be approachable. Here, once again, is the Cham language and script. So this is a language of its own, which is somewhat threatened, and its own script, which is very threatened. And the reason it's very threatened is that in the mid-19th century, the Emperor of Vietnam overran the kingdom of Champa, and in extremely brutal fashion suppressed the Cham people and tried to deny them their sense of their own integrity and identity. The Cham were both Muslim and Hindu. He forced the Hindus to eat cow. He forced the Muslims to eat pork. And so you can see that also suppressing a writing system is part of an act of cultural genocide. That's just one example. Why are so many scripts endangered? As I say, 85 to 90%. So in some cases, it's because a dominant culture introduced new writing technologies. I've got a picture here of the printing press because when the British were controlling much of South Asia, when they brought printing presses in, they didn't want to go to the expense of having type cast for every script. And as we know, India is an extraordinarily multilingual, multi-scriptal country. And so they made decisions, which are the ones that are important enough for us to actually have type for. So immediately that meant that the favored scripts would be much more broadly used and much more broadly visible and available, and those that were still handwritten would quickly dwindle. In some cases, it's a matter of invasion. This is someone writing in one of the indigenous scripts of the Philippines. So when the Spanish invaded the Philippines and introduced Spanish language, they also introduced the Latin alphabet. And anybody who wanted a job, for example, alongside the Spanish administration, needed to learn not only Spanish, but also the Latin alphabet. And so scripts like this, which are obviously incredibly deeply connected to the cultures because of the tools being used and because of the bamboo, which is obviously also indigenous to the Philippines, all of those traditional scripts began to die out. In many instances, scripts have been associated with a religion or a practice of some kind of sacred nature. And when that religion or that sacred practice has been changed or overthrown, then destroying documents associated with the former religion has been a common practice. This one is actually happening in India in this painting. Regime change. This beautiful script here called Ranjana is from Nepal, and in the late 18th century, there was a religious conversion and a regime change, and subsequently, the Nepali scripts, the traditional Nepali scripts, were so forbidden that you could actually be imprisoned and have all of your property confiscated for writing in them. So this is just a sign of how deeply a script represents a culture and its beliefs and its traditions. And this is another example of a very early use of the Cham script. And as I say, the desire to suppress minority cultures, having overrun the Cham people, then the Cham script was systematically suppressed and destroyed. And as you can see from this carving of mine, it's sort of carving in progress. This is just unbelievably beautiful. So this is an interesting question. Why don't we care? How come we haven't heard about endangered alphabets up until now? So I'm quoting Wikipedia here. The Cham script is still used for ceremonial and religious purposes. So that gives no sense of what actually happened. It gives no sense of the cultural genocide. And linguists, by and large, are very unwilling to get involved in political issues, but scripts are really political. More importantly, we as Latin script users, and I apologize to anybody here whose first script is not a Latin script, but those of us who use Latin scripts have a hard time understanding scripts that are used by only one community, because we're so used to these letters of ours that are used by 3/4 of the world. Scripts that are used for only one purpose. There's a script in Indonesia that is only used to write poems that are recited during circumcision ceremonies. And to us, that just seems strange. Scripts that are not secular, our alphabet is extremely secular. It's used for everything. And so a script where, as I say in the next line, the very act of writing is an act of reverence. It's something that just doesn't compute to us. For us, writing is something that everyone should be able to use for everything. And that isn't universally the case at all. And in fact, when we come across scripts that are not like that, the assumption has often been that such scripts are primitive, are archaic, are used only by an insignificant minority. So as if the bigger the number, the more valid a script is. But in fact, what we'll see is that a script is valid to its community and its users. And if we try and deny that, it's as if we're saying, oh, and you also can't use traditional music forms, or you shouldn't use traditional dress. And we say, therefore, the community should adopt a more widely used secular digitized script. And so even though this conference is about digital learning, it's a tool that is easily misused. So traditional scripts are rarely seen as culturally important. And as I say, it would be unthinkable for us to say, oh, music, dance, cuisine, costume, you shouldn't do those either. But nevertheless, we say we're actually doing you a favor if we introduce the Latin alphabet and teach that to you. So the unique script is important to its community because it's a visible reminder of their history, their identity, their days of significance, especially if they've been marginalized or overrun. It's the repository for the accumulated wisdom of the culture. The letter forms embody the history, the tools. Remember that knife and the bamboo, the shapes of the letters actually embody the history of the culture. Above all, a unique script that is used by a particular community, it is theirs. It is their own. It is like a flag, a coin, a stamp, or an anthem for a community that may have none of those. So this is what I'm doing. I am doing this carving of traditional scripts. This is a carving I did of the name of a village in Sierra Leone that had kept a script alive for nearly a century. And when this carving made its way back to them and they saw their own script, that's their reaction. As you can see, it's a reaction that has not much to do with just writing. It has everything to do with identity and pride. So I started this organization called the Script Keepers Network. And what we do is to try to introduce people who have a script that is traditional or new that they're trying to revitalize, and connect them up with people who have the skills, the time, and the interest to help them. This is a new script that's been created recently for the Nenzit languages. This is one of our projects we're working on. This is another project in Chakma, which is a language and script from Bangladesh and northeastern India. And we're developing text-to-speech models and educational tools for teaching Chakma. And this one I'm sure you'll like. So we have a VR specialist who has created a virtual reality program which enables people to learn Tibetan calligraphy. And as you can see, that is what is going on right here. The last thing I want to leave you with is this idea. This is one of my sculptures, and the 3 pieces of text in 3 different endangered scripts say the right to speak, the right to read, the right to write. And that is sort of my motto. This is one of the books that I've written on the subject. And it's an introduction to about 100 of the world's minority scripts. And in each case, it really asks the question, what is special about this script? Why is it endangered? Why is it important to its community? Why should we pay it attention and respect? And I'll wind up here now, but if you're interested in getting in touch with me, I would love to continue the conversation afterwards. If you go to my principal website, which is endangeredalphabets.com, then you can reach me through the contact form there. And I look forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we go back to human beings instead of pictures.
Yeah, thank you. Really, really great. And excuse me for saying ancient languages. Well, I'm new in that, but you said very, very, very right. The script the means a lot to a community. If we use it on a large level, it doesn't mean that those who are used on a small level are not equally important
Exactly.
as those. But maybe if you just can comment, we try to preserve, like, music, the folk parts, dances, and things like that. Somehow we neglect the scripts in that way. Usually communities are always looking, to preserving some heritage. Somehow the language, the scripts are not so much in their focus. Why should it's so?
Right. So there is a history, at least a 200-year-old history of mostly European nations going out, creating empires, where for them it was part of their way of improving and educating and civilizing the cultures they came across, to introduce religion, to introduce social order along the British lines or the French lines or whatever, and also to introduce writing in the Latin alphabet. And so for us, this practice has gone on for so long, we forget that it's right there. And so we see the modern equivalent with the internet, where, the very coding of the internet is in the Latin alphabet. And even though there's changes taking place right now, up until very recently, you really need, if you wanted to negotiate e-commerce, for example, then you needed to use a majority script and a majority language. So we it took us a long time even to realize that endangered species were important, right? That was the 1960s. Until that, it's like, oh, they just die out. They're kind of in the way, or they couldn't adapt. It wasn't until the 1990s that people started talking about endangered languages and realizing, wow, there's only 3 speakers left of that language. We need to go and record them right now. And because I think in Europe, we recognize multiple languages, but script is something that it's just there, it's everywhere, that we forget that even when we say, for example, if you're a Breton, then you have a Breton tradition, you have a Breton language or a Catalan language.
Yeah.
All of them are in the Latin alphabet. And so we sort of neglect to see, wait a second, that is an element too.
Yeah, you're right. It is important for our identity as a person to know our heritage.
Exactly.
We have to know where we're coming from in order to know where we want to go, and the script and language is part of that. So thank you for your part. Let's move on to the Philippa now, and I'll share the recording she has shared with us. So just give me a second. Okay, that's not it. That's it. But just, sorry, it's difficult to see. Just sorry, give me a second. I need to organize it first in order to be able to use it. Yeah, okay. Let's do it like this, and I will share it. Okay, so let me see if it's going. Yes. So.
Hello. Let me begin by thanking Jade for her kind invitation to present today. I'm very sorry that I can't be with you live. However, I'm going to share a short PowerPoint and tell you a little bit about my research. So my name is Philippa Steele, and I'm based at the University of Cambridge, where I run a research project called VIEWS, which stands for Visual Interactions in Early Writing Systems. My own background is in the study of ancient languages and writing systems in the Mediterranean, especially Greece and Cyprus. However, the VIEWS project has a more global outlook. So we're looking at the study of writing from multiple theoretical perspectives and also at a number of global case studies. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my research today. Under the umbrella of the VIEWS project, I also run an initiative called the Endangered Writing Research Network, and I'm closely involved with the Script Keepers Network as well, which I believe Tim will have mentioned in his own presentation. So I want to briefly introduce some of my research on language and writing endangerment, focused on the ancient world, and to think a little bit about the lessons that we can learn from ancient languages and scripts to tackle endangerment in today's world. So the main case study I'll use is ancient Cyprus, which has been a focus of my research for a long time, and provides an unusual opportunity to understand a particularly distinctive writing tradition, a tradition that lasted for some 1,500 years before it eventually succumbed to the pressures of the changing geopolitical and socio-linguistic landscape. So eventually it was lost. this writing tradition is usually referred to as Cypriot syllabic because it's a syllabic script, and I'll show some examples in a moment. The fact that it lasted for 1500 years means that we can take a diachronic perspective, and that diachronic perspective is really valuable because it allows us to study endangerment and also the flip side of that coin, namely vitality, over a long period. So we can try to understand what changed over time, why the writing tradition and the language variety or varieties that were written in it, why they had high vitality in some periods and why eventually they lost vitality and became endangered. It's also particularly important to think of writing as related to language, but essentially separate, something that can be studied in its own right. Now, for many writing traditions that are endangered today, we can't take the kind of diachronic approach that we can for a historical case study. We're often forced to take a purely synchronic approach, thinking about how we can try to help a community maintain its writing tradition in the here and now. And of course, many modern scripts may not be well documented historically either, and some may be recent creations even. So these historical examples can help us to give important insights that contribute to efforts to maintain endangered languages and writing traditions in the modern day by giving a kind of long-term perspective, a long-term view of the factors that affect vitality. So let me introduce the Cypriot case. The first evidence of writing in Cyprus spans the Late Bronze Age, so between the 16th and 11th centuries BCE. So this is just the first phase of the distinctive writing tradition. Inhabitants of the island at this time developed a script that seems to have been in some sense borrowed from ancient Crete. But in Cypriot hands, it became quickly and quite radically visually distinctive. The sign shapes don't look that similar to the Cretan ones. It becomes very distinctively Cypriot very quickly. And it's not only the sign shapes, but also the kinds of documents that are developed. So here you can see some writing on clay documents. There's a clay tablet, which might remind us of other cultural situations at the time, so where cuneiform was used to the east, and where linear A and B were used to the west of Cyprus. But the Cypriot examples of clay tablets are quite unusual. They don't really conform to the kinds of standards that we see elsewhere. And we also see distinctive document types like these clay balls that you can see on the left here. Those are really distinctively Cypriot. The writing tradition of the Late Bronze Age remains undeciphered in the sense that we don't understand the language written in it. But we can at least say that in this period, a really close relationship began between this syllabic writing tradition and the island's kind of cultural identity. And that relationship was to last for 1500 years, as I mentioned. So once we get to the 10th century BCE, into the early Iron Age, we first start to have evidence of the Greek language, which of course is still spoken in Cyprus today. We don't have a huge number of inscriptions from that period, but as time goes on, particularly towards the 8th century and onwards, we see that Greek seems to have been a sort of majority language in Cyprus, but it wasn't the only one that was written in this distinctive syllabic tradition. there was also an indigenous language, or perhaps more than one indigenous language, of which we have a few surviving inscriptions. So there were clearly diverse linguistic communities who were using this distinctive script. Phoenician was also spoken on the island, although that had its own different writing system, which was also in use elsewhere. But linguistic diversity seems to have been a marker of Cypriot cultural identity as well. As you can imagine, over the span of 1500 years, there were very significant changes in the geopolitical circumstances in which Cyprus found itself. So in the late Bronze Age, there had been a kind of flourishing of trade. Into the early Iron Age, there was at first a period of kind of economic difficulty. And then later on, there were periods when on the island, probably some new administrations were developed, as well as old ones continuing. There was also a kind of waxing and waning of imperial control from outside powers like Assyria and Egypt. And those touched the island, but they didn't really make a significant imprint, especially in terms of writing and language use. Then, as we get into the 5th century BCE, Cyprus is drawn into the Persian Wars and ever more into the kind of political sphere of Athens and generally the Greek world. And then eventually, after the death of Alexander the Great, Cyprus was annexed by one of his generals. So his generals fought over his territory, and the one who ended up with Cyprus was Ptolemy. So we call this the Ptolemaic period. And what's really significant about the Ptolemaic period is that at that time, another variety of Greek, so not the local Cypriot dialect of Greek, but a kind of Mediterranean dialect of Greek that we called the Koine, that became the kind of official language in Cyprus. And that was written in the Greek alphabet, so in a different script. That script and the language variety associated with it became the vectors of official use in Cyprus. So they were the language and script of official inscriptions, political ones, for instance. Anything set up by authorities would be in this language variety and script. So this is the period during which the Cypriot syllabic writing tradition became endangered. So we can see here a very broad kind of chronological view of what happened over time. Now, I want to really finish by kind of focusing on endangerment and then on vitality. So what are the lessons that we can take from the Cypriot case? How did Cypriot syllabic writing become endangered? It might be easy to suggest that Cypriot syllabic writing was simply killed by the Greek alphabet. So here you can see an inscription where the top 2 lines are written in the Greek alphabet and they're written kind of larger. And at the bottom, you can see a line of Cypriot syllabic text. So for anyone who doesn't know these scripts very well, it may not be as obvious. But this is quite strikingly a digraphic inscription, so an inscription that has 2 separate scripts, and it shows a period when the Greek alphabet was starting to become an object of interest for Cypriots. What's really interesting is that the Greek alphabet in the rest of the Greek-speaking world is known from the 8th century BC onwards. In Cyprus, no one was really interested in the Greek alphabet, even though theoretically it has a kind of better linguistic fit. So the Cypriot syllabic script is actually a slightly awkward fit for the Greek language, because it doesn't represent all of the sounds that appear in the local Greek dialect of Cyprus. It doesn't distinguish all of those sounds, and it also necessitates writing in open syllables. Greek, without going into too many details, Greek is a language with lots of closed syllables. So there's a kind of mismatch between the type of writing system and the language that it was used to denote. And in spite of those problems, it was very popular. It remained culturally symbolic in Cyprus. So that linguistic fit of the writing system doesn't seem to have been much of a concern. And it's not until the end of the 5th century and later that Cypriots even start to become interested in the Greek alphabet, this other way of writing Greek. The Greek alphabet could be said to be kind of better tailored to Greek because it represents the different sounds better, and because it's a different kind of script, you don't have that problem with representing closed syllables. But nevertheless, that doesn't seem to have been the issue for Cypriots. They were perfectly happy to continue with their own script, which had very high vitality for a long time. So in the end, was it the Greek alphabet that killed Cypriot syllabic writing? It doesn't really work like that, I don't think. Now, the fact that there was a competing system clearly means that, you know, there was a possibility of a change, but those changes are conditioned by much wider political and socio-cultural factors. So there were the wider political changes, Cyprus being drawn into Mediterranean politics and interactions with Greece. Those earliest examples, the really kind of earliest entrenched examples of people experimenting with the Greek alphabet on Cyprus tend to come from political regimes, from the kings of city kingdoms. There are also, as time goes on, the local political changes that I mentioned, in the sense that the island becomes a Ptolemaic kingdom. So there are really drastic political changes there, because previously Cyprus had been home to lots of independent city kingdoms. Under the Ptolemaic regime, it was unified politically. And as I said earlier, there was a new official script and dialect. So now the Greek alphabet and the Koine Greek dialect would be seen everywhere in public inscriptions. And then alongside that, there are clearly sociolinguistic changes. So in writing, what we particularly see is that once you get to the 3rd century BCE, you hardly have any examples of Cypriot syllabic writing that are outside of the religious sphere. So religion seems to have been one of the most important places where that homegrown writing tradition and the local dialect that was written in it, where they survived in religious practice. And we might also think that they may have continued in some other spheres, maybe in the domestic sphere, for instance. But it's very difficult to say, because we can only work on the surviving inscriptions that we have, and stone inscriptions are much more likely to survive than inscriptions on other kinds of object. Now, we've talked about endangerment. I want to flip the coin, just to take a moment to explain. This is a coin of a king called Evagrius, who on his coinage used both the Cypriot syllabary and the Greek alphabet. So on the left, that side of the coin has only the Cypriot syllabary. On the right, we can see some Cypriot syllabic signs, mostly behind the goat's back, but also some letters of the Greek alphabet, the E and the A, and the one that looks like a Y, which is upsilon. They're maybe a bit more recognizable as letters of the Greek alphabet. But when I say let's flip the coin, what I mean is let's stop looking at endangerment and instead look at vitality. And this, I think, is where we can try to feed insights from historical research into efforts to maintain languages and writing traditions in the present day. So rather than saying what happened just at the end of the tradition of Cypriot syllabic writing, how did it become endangered and how was it lost, we can ask, why did the script have high vitality for the very long period when it did? Now, there are a few factors, and this is particularly what I've been looking at in my research. So the distinctiveness of the script and the whole writing tradition surrounding it seems to have been really important. Because that script was recognisably Cypriot, it was a kind of hook to hang cultural identity on, that sort of very distinctive island identity. Cyprus is also a home to very distinctive styles in art, in ceramics, in sculpture, and so on. And that writing tradition fits in very much with the kind of cultural footprint of the island throughout the later second millennium BCE and most of the first millennium BCE. The usage of the script is also really important. So it was clearly used across many domains for most of its lifetime. It was used in religion, but it was also used in official documents. It was used in graffiti, in accounting. You might inscribe it on jewelry, for instance, objects that are for display, on ceramics. There are lots of different object types with inscriptions. And there also seems to have been, going hand in hand with that, there also seems to have been widespread literacy too. Now, we're talking about the ancient world. We often think that in the ancient world, literacy was considerably lower than today. But when I say widespread, what I mean is that we have direct evidence for writing in different socioeconomic classes and even some evidence for gender variation in writing, for instance. So we can see that there was a spread of different people writing. We even get inscriptions in Egypt that seem to have been written by soldiers who were acting as mercenaries in one of the pharaoh's armies. And this is quite late on. This is the 4th century BCE. And they all write their names on the wall of this temple. So there's a temple where you have a set of names written in close proximity to each other. And they're people from different cities across the island, and they write their name and the city that they come from. So there's lots of good evidence for really kind of vibrant literacy in the Cypriot syllabic script. There's also evidence of high social visibility, and visibility is really important. And that is really the note that I wanted to end on. So visuality and visibility have become really the kind of cornerstone of my research. I told you that my project views visual interactions in early writing systems, and I'm really interested in thinking about not just writing as a kind of linguistic code, but writing as part of visual culture, writing as something that is visible in the day-to-day landscape. And in theory, the more that people see their written language in their daily lives, the more that they kind of practice their identity through writing. And that, I think, is the most important takeaway and something that we can think about when trying to work out how to support today's minoritized and endangered writing communities. So I will finish there and say thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, even though I'm very sad not to be there in person. You're always welcome to contact me and to visit our website with any queries about the Views project and anything that we do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Pippa. It was very interesting to hear about cypriotic syllabus and script and an issue of visuality and visibility. And now we are going forward. Jade will present us the digital revitalization of Naxi Dongba script via MOOC. So let's hear about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm going to share my screen first. Okay. Can you see it clearly?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you everybody for staying here to listen to my talk. And in my talk, I will explore how digital open education...
Sorry, just put it in a play mode so that we see a bigger presentation.
Sorry?
We just see the slides. You have to put it in a play mode, the slide.
Ah, okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. Will it be okay?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, I didn't change the screen. Okay, thank you. So in my talk, I will explore how digital open education can contribute to the revitalization of an endangered script, that is Dongba script. And I will focus my talk on the relationship between visuality as a feature of the script itself and the visibility as enabled through digital mediation, and the two key findings that Pippa has mentioned in her talk. So sometimes I think as we look back and to go forward. And so before I present the Dongba script, let's start with Naxi people to whom the Dongba script belongs. And Naxi people is an officially recognized ethnic minority in China with a population about 300,000 people. They're mainly located in southwestern China, for example, in Yunnan province here, and Sichuan province and some part of Tibet. And especially in Lijiang city, as you can see here on the screen. And the Lijiang Old Town has been listed as UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1997, and for its historical and cultural significance of the region. So Naxi society has traditionally been characterized by a very rich religious system, strong clan structures, and a distinctive cultural identity. Within this framework emerged the Dongba tradition, including ritual practice, mythology, and a unique script. So why this script is called Dongba? First, we need to know the meaning of Dongba. In Naxi language, it means sage. So they are shaman priests and ritual specialists who perform ceremonies when needed. The term Dongba religion derives thus from these priests. And the Dongba religion is animistic, emphasizing the connection between human world and the natural world. And as Dongba play a role as mediator between these two realms. So Dongba shaman priests compose ritual scriptures, classical texts, using the scripts they created. And Dongba religion lies at the heart of Naxi cultural system. So everything related, for example, the writing system, the scriptures, the ritual dances, artwork and ritual utensils are all prefixed with the term Dongba. As you can see in this slide, there are some pictures that I taken several weeks ago, and the big Dongba master He Liming, he was doing the ceremonies there. So what is it like, Dongba script? And I say it's kind of a hieroglyphic-like writing system. And sometimes it is described as one of the few still practiced pictographic writing in the world. And the manuscript are used as mnemonic aids to ensure the performance of the ritual procedures by the Dongba priest. And there are some very few usage in daily life. For example, some people use Dongba writing to write land deed, contract, seal, or ledgers, but very few. Okay. And in 2003, ancient Dongba manuscripts were inscribed in the UNESCO Memory of the World, as you can see here. And this writing consists of two scripts, as you can find here. The one is called Dongba, because largely they compose of largely pictographic system, and they convey meaning, and with about 1,400 scripts. And the Gerba system, that is syllabic phonetic system, and to provide phonetic support. And there are about 400 signs. And as for typology, there were 4 types of Dongba signs. Here you can see that. And first one, this typology demonstrates that it is a genuine writing system rather than merely a collection of drawings. So let's see them. Pictogram represent objects or things from reality or daily life. For example, here we can see man, eyes, sky, sun, and moon. And symbolograms, they consist of symbolic graphic marks. For example, we can see look, see, and another one, talk. And ideograms, they are formed through association of ideas based on simple graphic elements. For example, sunny day and fight. And you will find some simple graphs before in pictogram. And the last, ideophonograms, they're composed of both semantic components and phonetic components. For example, April. The word April is composed, it's just one sign, it's just one character. It's composed of month that gives meaning. The fourth gives meaning and sound, and the sign female gives only sound. So this sign is pronounced as Luemei. Another feature of the Dongba script lies in its variability of interpretation. That is, interpretation may vary from one Dongba to another, even when reading the same manuscript. As you can see here, the different interpretation by Dongba He Zhiwu and Fang Guoyu and by He Fayun. And that, therefore, meaning is not fixed in the written sign itself, but depends on ritual knowledge, memory, and interpretive expertise. So in this context, the skills and the wisdom of the interpreters are particularly valuable. And this is, how to say, a very famous Chinese researcher, Wang Yuanlu, has concluded about this phenomenon. He said that the Dongba script is in the transition phase between segmental and logographic writing, and that we can observe from its variability of interpretation. And Dongba's manuscripts have become part of a worldwide heritage. And today, we can find more than 34,000 preserved Dongba manuscripts in the world, not only in China, but also out of China, as you can see, for example, the Library of Congress, Harvard Yanjing Library, BULAC, and see in UK, the British Library, the United University of Manchester, and so on. And here, in the video, you can see that I filmed in BULAC in France, Paris. So although many have been digitized, only trained Dongba priests are capable to interpret them fully. So digitization and interpretation of the manuscripts are urgent. And today, only a few master Dongba remain who are able to interpret the scripts fluently. So what is distinctive about the tradition is that there is no stable position for Dongba script. That's quite different from in other religions. And there is temple where the priest can hold a stable position. But that's not the case for Dongba priest. And in daily life, they work as other people, and they will play the role as Dongba only when they are needed. And in addition, young people become less and less willing to commit to the long training process because the training process can last for more than 10 years. And then as a result, when a master Dongba passes away, a significant part of the embodied knowledge may disappear with him. And here are some traditional preservation. They include archiving, documentation, museum exhibition, and tourism display, and so on. In terms of education, the Nashi community organizes summer schools, as you can see on the lower part of the screen, and some training sessions for young people. And they also develop related teaching and learning materials for adults and children. But these initiatives receive very limited institutional support. So sustainable transmission of knowledge and practice is facing challenges today. And I just want to give a case of Dazu Primary School. And for more than 10 years, the primary school means the name of the primary school is Dazu, integrated Dongba culture in its curriculum. And that's not very usual in the Nashi region. However, it is now facing difficulties, and teaching of Dongba culture has recently been restricted. And they managed to find alternative spaces last year to continue teaching Dongba culture, as you will see on the left part of the slide. And you will see a small building here, colorful building here. And so this is the new building. And you will, in the middle of the slide, you will find a teacher holding a branch holding a sign to guide the students to go to school. So this road is called Tianyu Liufang Road. Tianyu Liufang, in fact, is national language, means go to read, go to school. So the students still managed making some Dongba script handicrafts this year. And the other two pictures on the right were taken in the summer last year. So we can see the fragility of local transmission efforts. And so local transmission or local preservation and transmission have limits, and as we can see. And this issue leads to an important question here. How can digital open education contribute to its sustainable transmission? What can we do? But that's what we aim to realize in this MOOC, Initiation to the Dongba Script. We want to reserve and revitalize this endangered writing system, as well as the culture it bears, in a living way through a MOOC in 4 languages. So the course is co-produced by 3 universities, forming an international and interdisciplinary collaboration. Our objective is to support its revitalization through digital pedagogy from outside the Nashi community. I want to show you first the teaser.
Of all the languages in the world, half are at threat of becoming extinct. On average, one language disappears every 2 weeks. One of the scripts currently endangered is strongly original. It is said to be the last pictographic script in the world. It is the Dongba script. Let's discover it together. The Dongba script is used among the Nashi people in southwest China by Dongba priests during their religious ceremonies. Dongba characters are sometimes fossilized figures of the natural and cultural environment of the Nashi. This MOOC guides you on a journey with an introduction to the Dongba script and the culture of the Nashi people. It includes the learning of 300 basic characters through multiple activities, covering topics ranging from human beings to daily life and religious ceremonies. This MOOC is the result of an international collaboration between INALCO in France, the University of Geneva in Switzerland, and the BLCU in China. By engaging in the learning program proposed, you will at the same time contribute to the preservation of a unique cultural heritage classified as Memory of the World by UNESCO in 2003.
So the Dongba MOOC, this teaser can give you a kind of general idea of what it is like. And the MOOC project, Dongba MOOC project, is not only an international collaboration, but also a multifaceted collaboration involving scholars, instructional designer, Dongba priests, students, and Nashi volunteers. So members of a Nashi community played a key role in consultation and content validation. That is very important for us. And it's impossible for me to name all contributors, but we can see that the project is co-production of knowledge across culture and institutional boundaries. And the MOOC comprises 7 modules. Module 1 introduces course, while Module 2 to 7 teach theme-based Dongba scripts. Each contain 5 sequences, as you can see here. Sequence 1 to 3 focus on learning Dongba characters along a path guided by pictographic writing logic. And with sequence 4 provide a summary exercise. And in sequence 5, we explore cultural topics with a forum discussion to support an online learning community. And each module concludes with a quiz, and learners who complete all modules receive a badge. I will show you the sequences here. Okay. And
Ce signe signifie femme ou fille. Il figure une personne portant une coiffe féminine.
Okay, the sequence begins with an instructional video introducing a specific family of simple Dongba characters, as you can see here, followed by exercise. So it emphasizes visual recognition and semantic association, highlighting the inherently visual nature of the script. So, and then, and then an exercise test understanding, help the learners to distinguish similar scripts, and through repeated comparison to sharpen their sensitivity to graphic variations and visual details. Okay. As you can see from this matching exercise. Next, Learners explore compound characters derived from the simple ones, discovering related signs and how meaning arises from graphic combinations. So in this exercise, they try to guess, simply to say, guess the meaning of each compound signs. And sometimes they can get clues from what they have learned beforehand. So this approach moves beyond the memorization and to fostering interpretive engagement. Practicing handwriting is important. It gives learners direct contact with the written form. So the act of writing reintroduces a bodily dimension, reconnecting digital learning with embodied practice, as you can see here. And after that, learner can review the characters using a searchable database, which acts as a digital lexicon and increases the script's visibility and accessibility beyond the course linear structure. So they can go directly to this part and they can download the lexical list. And at last, there will be when they finish all these 3 lessons with this kind of sequences, a summary exercise allows them to reinforce and consolidate the lesson content they have learned. And the culture section allows participants to explore specific cultural elements. For example, this one about Dongba priest. And there are 2 parts of activities. One is input static, that is they watch featuring short presentation, legendary history, animation, and the interview with Master Dongba here, that's input. And output, that is they will join discussion with proposed topics here and to compare Dongba priest with other religions. We also encourage participants to locate Dongba manuscripts worldwide and share their discoveries in the forum. So here there is an activity searching for Dongba scriptures in the world. And by identifying collections, archives, and digital repositories, they contribute to knowledge mapping instead of simply consume information. So here you can find a lot of learners share their findings in this forum. So the MOOC has run twice on the French MOOC platform FUN, F-U-N, France Université Numérique. So you can see the logo here. In 2023 and 2024, we attracting around 3,000 people, participants from 80 countries. And with 630 completing the first quiz and considered to be active learners, and 301 badges awarded. And the platform fund considers this rate rather high. So the data suggests that MOOC can support the global visibility of Dongba script. And apart from the statistics, of course, I cannot go further to give you more details about statistics. I just to share something about our experience. We received a lot of inquiries about where to learn Dongba script and national language, and also questions about how to go to Lijiang City to contact some summer schools or institutions or kind of training sessions. 2 master students in University of Geneva have selected Dongba script as their master thesis topic. And several graphic designers share their designs inspired by Dongba script on social media network like LinkedIn. And here I want to show you 2 images. These images are from workshops organized for teenagers by INACO and the University of Geneva. From online learning to offline activities, these workshops aim to introduce young audience to an unfamiliar writing system and to raise awareness of both the diversity of human writing systems and the endangerment of this unique script. Through creative activities, participants are encouraged to explore the visual logic of the characters and to experiment with writing them themselves. So the outcomes here were very encouraging, showing strong engagement and creativity among the young people, these teenagers. So before I stop, this project can impact the conservation of endangered writing systems across multiple dimensions: philosophical and linguistic, culture, language policy, and pedagogy. It invites us to ask, is writing simply a representation of language or complement to it? Such questions deepen our understanding of language, cognition, and culture, and especially what Tim has mentioned in her talk, the difference between language and writing. And the Dongba script embodies rich ritual and cultural knowledge. So digital preservation allows learners or more learners to engage with these practices and connect with the national heritage. And the MOOC aims to support revitalization from outside the immediate community, engaging hundreds or even thousands of learners. So this raises further question: how can its massive dimension reach be fully realized? Could it go beyond the learning to become a rich research hub or support citizen science? So overall, this project underscores the importance of digital preservation for endangered or minority languages, scripts, and the culture they carry. So a challenge that calls for collective reflection and action. So as MOOC designers and with the goal of promoting sustainable engagement, we are planning a self-paced version complemented by a periodical webinar for the Dongba MOOC. So please stay tuned for updates. Thank you very much for your listening and for your time.
Thank you, Jade. We have one question. It was written in Chinese, but I translated it in English, so I can pose the question. So, how do you think the changes in the scope of Dongba script and its standardization will affect its position in society? And how will the new National Common Language and Script Law affect Dongba culture, if I translated it properly?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Jade, for your question. You remember that I showed you an example just now from Dazu Primary School. In fact, at international scope, you know, in China, there are laws or to encourage or promote the learning and the teaching of minority languages and scripts. But at the local part, I just focus on Dongba script because I don't know what's about other languages or scripts or minority languages. There are 56 minorities 55 minorities in China. And but at the local level, sometimes they were not, or they have different policies. They may not follow what's inscribed in the national guide or national law. So I think there is a kind of difference from that. So it's difficult to say that and this will give impact to the whole or to the position of Dongba script in the whole society. But you know what we want to do, what we want to achieve from Dongba MOOC is that we can do something from outside if we cannot change something from inside. Okay. That's the purpose. So I think I have answered your question.
Thank you. Maybe I can pose the question. Tim, what do you think? We have these languages, the scripts and the writing system that are endangered, and now today I just used AI and translated Chinese to English very easily, you know. So how do you see these recent advances in artificial intelligence affecting the future of such minority endangered writing systems? Do they pose the risk, or they enable some new opportunities for visibility and revitalization? We just saw that Dongba script with MOOC has become much more visible, and preserved in that way.
So I have a saying, which is the internet always does two opposite things simultaneously. Or if you like, it's a two-edged sword. So on the one hand, I could not have done the research that I've done without the internet, without the digital tools that are available. AI is a different issue, so I'm just going to stick with that for the time being. Having said that, I want to sort of raise 2 points of caution. One is that as soon as you digitize something, you simplify it. And so my latest book is on handwriting, and I'm fascinated by the fact that everybody's writing is different. When you introduce a single digital standard, you take away that diversity, that expressiveness, that personal relationship between writer and reader. So that's one caution. The other caution I raise has to do with sacred texts. So sacred scripts. So at least 20 scripts in use in the world are actually sacred. In other words, it's not just these are used to write sacred books. It's that the act of writing and the act of reading is a sacred thing in itself. When you digitize that, you make it secular. You make it more available to everybody, and you make it more available for multiple purposes. This is exactly the issue that made Arabic, for example, resist printing for a while, because all of a sudden, instead of being the word of God spoken through a hand, it became a mechanical intervention. So I am all in favor of many of the tools that make our work possible. And I certainly know that, for example, I just got a message of congratulation from the Zagawa people who live on the borders between Sudan and Chad. They now have their script set up so they can text each other on it. Before that, they had to go through Arabic. They're not an Arabic people. They were conquered by the Arabs. And so it's a kind of a radical thing to say we can now text each other without going through the script of the people who conquered us centuries ago. So as I say, two-edged sword, two opposite things simultaneously.
Yeah, I agree with you, because today we try to digitalize as much as possible of written books, papers, everything, and it's the ancient books, for example, or papers are archived in special libraries and not visible to everyone.
Right.
You have to get the possibility to see it. So it's a two-side sword, in order to ensure the visibility, you have to digitalize it. Otherwise, it will be seen to just few people. And also the conditions of storage of such rare books and artifacts are very difficult. Sometimes we do not have so much space or conditions to preserve that. So yes, thank you for your answer. Maybe Jade, just before the end, the MOOC has enabled that you revival of Dongba script in a way, because as you said, that person should train for more than 10 years in order to become the priest who will be able to speak Dongba. Has the MOOC, I see it has went to the great results in order that you have over 300 certificates of the people and interest. So how to design a MOOC to be interactive and interesting to people? Otherwise, it is usual that in MOOCs you have high dropout rates, So how did you design it?
Thank you, Sandra, for this question. In fact, I didn't have time to develop everything in my talk because time was so short. And as for interactivity, that we realized within the Dongba MOOC, I think there are some important elements here. First, the interactive learning components. That's the learning sequences that I've shown you just now. So it's quite visual, and we can see that most people say that we had a kind of post-MOOC survey, and we got people's comments about the MOOC. They really appreciate this kind of sequence design. And script recognition, annotation, and so on. And the second one is we pay very attention to discussion forum, because at the first round, we had 3 tutors, and each tutor speak at least 3 languages. So, and the tutors will stay online, and they answer questions very immediately. And I think tutoring is very important to reinforce engagement, especially for very large online course, and that's a very important part. And another one is for the questions in forum. Sometimes, because I have analyzed a lot of MOOCs or similar MOOCs, I found there is no specific questions. For example, the question that I've shown you just now is about the Dongba itself, Dongba priest. Okay, and we ask students to compare the similar status or similar people in their culture and with Dongba priests. So that's specific questions. And crowdsourcing elements, and that's a kind of citizen science-like activity. And all these meaningful elements or kind of interactive activities, they can engage people to continue learning and to continue sharing, and we evaluate their sharing and their contribution. I think that's important. So in one word, human intervention is important.
Thank you. We have come to the end of our session. Maybe just one sentence in the end from each of you. Why do you think it's important to take care about rare, endangered scripts and writing systems? What does it mean to you? Why do you take so much care about it? So what would be your message to the others to recognize that importance? Tim?
Everybody deserves the right to speak, the right to read, the right to write.
Perfect, thank you. Jade?
As for my part, and today we're talking about the digital humanities. And digital humanities today focus more on what's in the past. And I think this MOOC may set a new direction that digital humanities can help. That's what I say just now. We look backward to go forward to see what we can do for the future through what I have learned in the past.
Thank you, really nicely. You took my last sentence as well, so I think we conclude with that. So I wish to thank my speakers team, Jade and Philippa, who recorded really, really interesting session. I have learned a lot. Thank you for raising awareness about the importance of the writing systems and the scripts, and how we can use digital technologies to make them more visualized and visible. And I wish to thank all the participants to being in the session today. Thank you, and have a good weekend, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Sandra, for your organization. Thank you. Bye.